think the environment has to be changed.
What we're saying is have a heart.
We've got to be able to regenerate our
There'll be
conduct.
people who are kind, people who are cruel, but that's life. You can be bigoted about pigeons. I'm fine with that. What's wrong with Singaporeans?
Welcome back. We are going to end this interesting discussion with a survey of how prostitution is handled overseas and whether there are any lessons that we can learn from it. Starting with Selima.
By this year or next year, Singapore, Interpol, Singapore will be one of the 3 headquarters for Interpol, and they will be in operation by next year. And trafficking is one of the pillar of Interpol. I think it will be really embarrassing if we don't have a good trafficking laws, legislation, all the 4 Ps that Braema mentioned. We don't have that, and we have the Interpol headquarters. So it is quite an ironical situation.
Okay, spoken like an activist. Timothy?
So the question is about...
Any lessons that we can learn from any country?
Oh, right, definitely. I think the Nordic model is a solid one in terms of the anti-trafficking legislation that's been placed there. I think it started in the late 1980s, early 1990s. I'm not too sure about the time period, but what it does is, instead of focusing on supply, it criminalizes demand. And so what that does is it makes the purchase of sex a fearful act that can be prosecuted.
You have to go for the culprit rather than the victim.
Yeah, I agree with the Swedish model as already explained. And then the state of Victoria in Australia has legalized prostitution, which then means that it's open and so you reduce the exploitation in a lot of ways because it's properly documented and everything else. The other one that I just read, and I stand corrected on this, I think it is Switzerland, that has like something like outhouses that people drive to, and it's all nicely done up chalets or whatever that are basically like functioning as brothels, all properly licensed. So here are some models where one could follow. Each has got its downside. Like the Swedish side, what has happened is quite a number leave Sweden and they come to Asia on sex tourism or tourism with sex. In state of Victoria, the migrant workers who have come in are the ones who are doing the underground undercutting those who are properly legalized sex workers. It's okay. These are some of the problems. The 4th one that I would like to cite is like Malaysia. Malaysia has put in an anti-trafficking law. I would say that it is still leaves a lot to be desired where governance and execution is concerned. But what is good is that there's a severe critiques that are coming up on the law, and from what I have gathered that they are going to try and amend the law to make it better. So these are all some examples that I can cite. The last area I want to go to, nothing to really do with sex trafficking per se. This cannot happen without looking at internet laws. It has to happen, monitoring sex websites, etc., I think are very important because they have become platforms on which a lot of transactions are taking place.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, Suresh?
Okay, I think we're all in agreement about the fact that you can't eradicate prostitution. So the next best objective that we're talking about, or is within our contemplation, is controlling prostitution. Then there may be arguments...
Managing prostitution.
Managing prostitution. Well, managing prostitution, I think, has got a certain element of keeping prostitution in control, and where it's not so rife and not so visible in a lot of the other countries in Southeast Asia where it's extremely obvious. So if it's controlling prostitution and managing prostitution, then the question is, should there also be a policy to prosecute prostitutes? Right now, the prosecution of prostitutes, that ability or enabling section is under the Miscellaneous Offences Act, and that is only confined to prostitutes who solicit in public places and so on and so forth. So there may be an argument that you should try and expand those provisions to have solicitation per se being an offence and have an active policy to prosecute prostitutes. But having said that, I am very, very aware of the trafficking situation, because if the prostitute is a victim of trafficking, then I agree with Timothy that if you prosecute a person who is a victim of circumstances and she's plying a trade not through her own volition, then it will not be right to prosecute that prostitute. So those are the only qualifications I make in my mind. And as far as the experience is concerned, I think there are a number of foreign experiences we can adopt. But the idea, I think, at the end of the day is to ensure that it's a managed vice activity which doesn't have the spillage into creating epidemics and sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, and so on and so forth. And I think that should be the main concern.
For me, I'm a frontline worker, so I will say that this whole evening we all address as a woman, but I see as a two both. It's a man and woman. You know, you have seller, you also have buyer. So I believe as a frontline worker, I do face-to-face to speak to the prostitute and also be able to speak to the customer. So I would like to put in this way, it's not more into the human trafficking, but I would say that we need to have more people to be aware of this. If we don't, this issue, if we don't address it, it will grow. So when it grows faster and bigger, it's very difficult to handle it. So I think in the two ways, as helping the women and also have to help the guys to be understand. So this is from my side.
I think that's a good roundup to the discussion tonight, that there are two sides to the picture, the consumer and the supplier. And we have to look at both in order to address the problem. And we also have to understand that the victim sometimes needs more help than the culprit, if we can call it a culprit. We leave you to sleep on it. Good night.